Hello again. The head of the CIA, John Brennan, has admitted that the Arab Spring uprisings 5 years ago created fertile ground for terrorists.
These, ISIL, they took great advantage of the aftermath of the Arab Spring and the inability of the new governments that emerged to be able to adapt to what the new reality was. The expectations, including here in Washington, that democracy was all of a sudden going to break out and flourish once the authoritarian leaders were toppled. They were way out of sync with what the reality of the Middle East is.
Giving more background to the story is our correspondent, Caleb Maupin.
Well, when he was speaking at the Brookings Center, John Brennan indicated that his agency, the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency, got it completely wrong when predicting the outcome of the Arab Spring protests back in 2011. The CIA predicted that al-Qaeda and other terrorist groups would actually get weaker as a result of the protests. Instead, what happened, according to Brennan, is that ungoverned spaces were created. This created an opening for the terrorists to move in. Now, let's remember what was said by U.S. back in 2011 when the Arab Spring first broke out. Let's take a listen.
Square by square, town by town, country by country, the people have risen up to demand their basic human rights.
Now, according to Brennan, these events that were widely praised by Western leaders back in 2011 ultimately resulted in the strengthening of terrorist organizations around the world. Now, another thing that John Brennan touched on in his remarks at the Brookings Center, U.S. relationship with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Let's take a listen to that.
Well, I will emphasize just the importance of the security and intelligence relationship that we have with Saudi Arabia. But you're right that the Saudi government and leadership today has inherited rather fundamentalist, extremist in some areas, version of the Islamic faith.
Now, Brennan indicated that Saudi Arabia has been widely promoting its rather conservative and extreme interpretation of the Islamic faith, and according to Brennan, that may help the terrorist organizations to recruit. Now, Brennan was very clear that he considered the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to be a key ally of the United States in the war on terror, despite the problems created by some of its religious ideas.
Meanwhile, former CIA officer Philip Garaldi says the U.S. was caught unaware and underestimated significantly the dangers of the Arab Spring.
The U.S. government, for reasons of its own, was overly optimistic about what it was seeing occur in the Middle East. Washington was certainly pushing any kind of objective observer, I think, would have agreed that the breakdown of many of these governments would create a power vacuum. And in the power vacuum, naturally, the militant groups are able to insert themselves. The Saudi government, the Saudi kingdom, is essentially reliant on the support of what we would consider to be extremist religious type. Now, the problem is once you have these fundamentalist types in place in all these countries, they provide an infrastructure for other extremists that perhaps are more in the line of the terrorists to exploit that infrastructure and make trouble.
The Obama administration has come up with a plan to join forces with Russia in the ongoing operation against terrorist groups in Syria. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry is due in Moscow on Thursday to focus on the proposals. Earlier, I discussed the visit with RT's Ilya Petrenko.
Secretary Kerry back in Moscow yet again, but if we look back at just about a week ago, the presidents of U.S. and Russia had a phone conversation, and they confirmed both that they are ready for joint military efforts in Syria. That takes time and a lot of thorough discussion, and there are suggestions that John Kerry is in Moscow to cement a potential deal. When it comes to the current top diplomats of Russia and the U.S., they have always gotten along very well, even in the most difficult times. But this time around, if you look at least at the number of times John Kerry, the visits he made to Moscow, that is quite impressive. 4 times in just over a year.
We could do more, then there was a freeze, then there was unfreeze.
Спасибо.
Победа Виктора.
Let me take advantage of this moment to wish you a very, very happy birthday. I know that it will bring you extra wisdom in our conversations today. You look terrific for 39.
Жан, спасибо, но если мудрость изменяется количеством дней рождения, то мне за тобой не угнаться.
John Kerry also seems to have learned his way around downtown Moscow, where he was seen buying gifts for friends and family. When arriving in the Russian capital, getting off the plane at the airport, he could be seen once carrying a big suitcase. And since his talks with the top officials of Russia have been getting more and more informal, Vladimir Putin didn't hesitate to make a joke about it.
Подумал, может быть, в этом кейсе было что-то такое, что вы не могли никому доверить. Что-то ценное. Видимо, деньги привезли, чтобы нам торговаться.
But of course, it's not all that smooth. There are national security officials in the U.S. who have called Kerry's visit a counterproductive sellout to the Kremlin. They do not trust Moscow, and Pentagon is largely against such cooperation between Russia and the U.S. in Syria. And Obama has been known for being somewhat dependent on the more hawkish opinions, for having to look back at the anti-Russian lobby. But of course, we got to remember that he's edging closer to the end of his term. And there are some who believe that now he may be more inclined for cooperation with Russia to finally make a sound step to bring peace to Syria, something this country hasn't seen for some 5 years now.